This is Tread Boldly, Leadership Lessons from the Saints, with Father Nathan Cromly.
My name is Father Cromly, and this is Tread Boldly, Leadership Lessons from the Saints. When we think about leaders in the Bible, most of us think about figures like Moses or King David. Not everyone immediately turns to think about Saint Joseph. And yet, in truth, Saint Joseph was the head of the Holy Family. Even though Mary and Jesus were holier than him, he still had the burden of leading that family, protecting it and providing for it in the name of God. He was, after all, the husband of the Virgin Mary and the foster father of Christ, and therefore the head of his own household. And when you look more closely at the biblical texts, his life was filled with leadership opportunities and lessons for us. Just imagine, for example, what it must have meant for him to learn that Mary, whom he loved enough to ask to be his wife, had already taken a vow to God to remain a virgin. Now, while that vow isn't necessarily recorded in Scripture, it is a part of our Catholic tradition. Why else, says St. Augustine, would Our Lady ask the angel, "How can this be, for I do not know man?" unless she was alluding to the fact that somehow in her past she had been consecrated body and soul to God. And having done this, surely she would have had to tell Joseph before the marriage in order for Joseph to freely enter into that sacred covenant. This is, of course, no small thing for those who are to be married. It meant both a sacrifice and a commitment from the heart of Joseph, and shows us a real lesson from his life for us who are leaders today. You see, St. Joseph could have said to the Virgin Mary, "I don't care what you've done or who you are, you have to fit into my plan. Since I'm in charge of the household and the relationship, I will determine the parameters and you simply have to obey." Many of those who do not lead in the footsteps of Christ treat leadership in just this way. A task needs to be done, and they therefore, taking the responsibility for accomplishing that task, demand that everybody fit into their way of accomplishing it. While certainly this could be useful in many situations, it also has a lot of negative consequences. Innovation is stifled, morale can decline, and the synergies that can come from unexpected and unknown surprises in the talents and skill sets of the people whom we lead can often be overlooked or neglected. And in St. Joseph's case in particular, he was leading two very gifted people, to say the least, the Virgin Mary and the Son of God. Just imagine what it would have looked like if St. Joseph had chosen to try to control the situation, not recognize the particular qualities or dispositions of the people underneath him, and demand that those two fit into his plan for how the family should roll. Obviously, without saying, this would have been a colossal error. Thank goodness he did not do that. On the contrary, he took the unexpected, the vow of the Virgin Mary to remain a virgin her whole life unto God, as a new parameter that would allow him to lead well. You see, not all leadership needs to be about being personally responsible and getting people to follow the way we think things should be done. Sometimes the best leadership like St. Joseph's, requires us leaders to serve the people underneath us by helping them to achieve the greatness that God has called them to, even if it means readjusting the parameters of our own expectations. While this might seem like a sacrifice and feel like a sacrifice often for us, in fact, it has the unexpected benefit of also allowing us to recognize new things, innovations, talents, skill sets, and even situations that can enhance our ability to lead well. After all, by St. Joseph allowing the Virgin Mary to remain in her virginal consecration, he opened his whole family to a level of intimacy with God that otherwise would have been unattainable. And he also allowed his spouse to remain open to the will of God for her. And that will, of course, included that her virginity blossom forth into the motherhood of God. Because he chose not to control, but rather to serve in his leadership, and recognize the inherent greatness and qualities of the people whom he was leading, he was able to successfully incorporate the blessings that God wanted to give to his family into his family. This is really a challenge for all of us. It begins by letting go of the projects or plans that we have, even if they might be good, and focusing in on the people whom we are entrusted with. How can we help each one of them to follow in the footsteps of Christ and to tread boldly in their own way?